Hello, and welcome to the 404 Media Podcast, where we bring you unparalleled access to hidden worlds, both online and IRL. 404 Media is a journalist-founded company and needs your support to subscribe. Go to 404media.co. As well as other bonus content, subscribers can hear us answer their questions in future podcasts. Ask us anything you want on podcast at 404media.co. I'm your host, Joseph, and with me for the first 404 Media podcast of 2024 are my fellow co-founders, Sam Cole.
Hello.
And Jason Kebler.
Hey, Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year to everybody. Thank you for listening. We started the new year with a few stories straight away. This first one, real estate visionary allegedly behind massive viral Airbnb fraud charge. Some listeners may be familiar with the contours of this story, and we will get into what is new, specifically that this guy was charged, right, and everything in that court record. But Jason, before we get into that, this all relates to a 2019 piece from Vice, right? An investigation there. What was that story, and sort of what was the reaction for those who don't know?
Yeah, so we didn't work on this story back when we were at Vice, but it happened while we were there. It was another part of Vice. A reporter, Ali Conti, had booked an Airbnb somewhere. And when she went to go check in, she got a message that was basically like, hey, this apartment is no longer available, so we've moved you to another apartment. And the other apartment was like really shitty, essentially. And it's not even clear if it existed. And so she was a victim of what's essentially known as a double booking scam, where, it's a little bit complicated, but basically people are booked into these Airbnbs that may or may not exist, and then they're canceled on at the last minute. And then the host sort of like undermines the customer when they go to complain. They like make up some excuse saying that the customer didn't show up or whatever. And over the years, Airbnb has been like pretty bad at giving people refunds just as a practice. This has changed as a result of Ali's story.
But, it was at the time, I'd say. I mean, they're still bad sometimes now, but at the time it was especially bad, right?
Right. And so she did this like huge investigation into this scam and like the fact that it was happening to thousands of people all over the country, published the story, and it was massive. Like as far as stories about Airbnb goes, like I can't think of a bigger story about an Airbnb scam. I think it's probably like the most infamous Airbnb scam that's happened. And like right after it was published, Brian Chesky, who's the CEO of Airbnb, sent an email to everyone at the company being like, we're going to do all of these reforms. They started verifying all of the millions of listings that they had to ensure that they actually existed, which is pretty shocking that they hadn't done that already.
Right.
But basically it like led to like all of these changes. And just like anecdotally, I think it was maybe the highest trafficking article that Vice published that year. Like it just went very, very, very viral. So it was like in the public consciousness back in 2019.
Yeah, I think it like a lot of people related to it because even if they hadn't fallen victim to this particular scam, a ton of people have had weird ass Airbnb experiences, especially at this time before they verified all of the listings, right? So, as you say, that piece, which I'll link in the show notes, called "I Accidentally Uncovered a Nationwide Scam on Airbnb." I don't know the particulars of this, but if you scroll right to the bottom of the article, there is an update note where the author writes that the morning after this article was published, the FBI contacted Vice about the claims made above. I don't know anything beyond that. All I would say is that several years later, as in now, we have the person behind this, allegedly behind this, being charged, a man called Shrey Goel, and he was identified in the original Vice piece through property records. Basically, Conti found that, well, a lot of these victims were being ushered around the same sort of building. So maybe the scammer owns the building and then went through property records and basically found this person. Um, and now Shrey has been charged with wire fraud and aggravated identity theft. Obviously, very, very serious crimes. And while the original Vice piece laid out sort of the human experience of it and the contours, this court record is insane just in how it explains the scale of what Shrey was allegedly doing. 100 properties across much of the country, including California, Colorado, Illinois, Texas, Tennessee, Wisconsin, many more states. And him and his crew allegedly booked a whopping 10,000 reservations through the platform, netting an incredible $7 million, which we absolutely did not know about that until this. You said that it is a little bit complicated, Jason, and I agree because you're reading the court record and it says it's a double booking scam, and then it keeps looping on itself, and it makes it sound a lot more complicated than it actually is. But as you say, somebody tries to book a room, they can't, they get diverted elsewhere, and that's basically it. And in some cases, Shrey and his crew allegedly, they were put on Airbnb, a property that they weren't affiliated with, one that belonged to somebody else, right? And then they try and turn up and they get a call, the guest does, and they have to go to one that Shrey actually does own. Or in some cases, it was even properties that the crew they didn't even exist. So they would just make up listings and then direct people over there. There is one section. Sorry, go ahead, Jason.
I think the complicated thing to me is like I see double booking scam and I'm like, well, the customer who is scammed can just request a refund. So like how did they end up making money? And that's kind of like the complicated bit. Is like,
yes. And that's the crux of it, because the way they got money is what you alluded to was Airbnb's shitty refund system, or lack thereof, as in the customers would very understandably request refunds when they would end up in a crappy apartment, and Shrey or his crew would allegedly then talk to Airbnb and make up stories about, no, the guests didn't, they were never there, or they did stay successfully, so their complaint is invalid, or they were actually the problem here, and they would convince Airbnb to not issue the refund, meaning that Shrey and his crew got to keep the money. That's basically how they actually generated the money. Let me just, even though we put it simply, let me just read out this one paragraph which has 3 points about how they did it. This is straight from the court record. They provided the guest with a false excuse as to why a booked property was unavailable. They cancelled the reservation but resisted the assessment of any cancellation fees. They convinced the guest to move to an alternative property by falsely representing the alternative, as an upgrade, that sort of thing, and denied funds. And then finally, they lied to the rental platforms, that being Airbnb, and there's another one mentioned in there as well, about the guest or reservation to keep money from guests entitled to refunds. At the same, it's a complicated, elaborate scam at one moment, and at the same time it's super simple in that they just go, no, don't give them their money and give it to us instead.
Yeah, I this is semi unrelated, but I think anyone who's tried to get a refund from Airbnb during that time period probably has a similar story. um I went to an Airbnb in LA before I moved here, and we got to the Airbnb and it was disgusting. Like I've stayed in a lot of really, really bad places, and I'm not someone who complains a lot, but there was like food everywhere. The bed had dirty sheets on it. The couch was literally made of duct tape and it smelled like cigarette smoke. And it had, not only did it smell like cigarette smoke, but they had all of these candles that were still lit that were designed to mask the smell of tobacco smoke, which is not something I even knew existed.
Lovely.
And so we called Airbnb to complain. And rather than just being like, hey, like, here's your money back, this is crazy, like I sent all of these pictures, all of this stuff. It was like a 3-hour process where I was on the phone with them. They said that they were going to send out like an air purifier. And they also wanted me to like, this was at the peak COVID, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted me to bring the host to the apartment and secretly record him and get
What?
him to admit that it smelled like smoke. Like
What?
straight up, this is a customer service rep. And I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm not, first of all, I feel sick being in this building because it smells like so much smoke. Second of all, like it's peak COVID. I don't want to like meet with this person that I don't know. Third of all, I'm not going to secretly record him.
Yeah,
Like
like
it
an
was crazy.
Airbnb customer rep is trying to get you to do an undercover mission.
It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And I was like, this is nuts. And we were supposed to stay there for a month. So it was thousands of dollars. And I was just like after eventually they gave us our refund back, but we had nowhere to stay that night. Like we were in LA with nowhere to stay. So and it was, I don't know. I just like had been using Airbnb instead of hotels at that point. So then I went and booked another Airbnb at like an inflated price. So I think that for a long time, this was sort of like Airbnb's MO, where it was like really hard to cancel outside of the specific cancellation processes and really hard to get refunds because I think they wanted to be host friendly, maybe, but it ended up being that if you got into like a bad situation, you would get stuck on this customer service loop for a really long time. And so I can see how he made $7 million
Right.
from people who are just like, fuck it. Like I can't go back and forth with tricky customer service or
Yeah.
I don't have documentation or whatever.
Yeah. So it's not just the Airbnb. So the Airbnb refund mechanism is facilitating this, and then it's also the lack of verification in that Stray and his crew were allegedly able to create all these fake accounts, and it's kind of clever in that they would have names that were couples. Often, I'm just trying to bring up one in front of me. Here we go, like Annie and Chase. Becky and Andrew. And I swear, when you go through Airbnb, like a ton of them are like presumably rich couples, right? who are rich enough to own a property to be able to rent out, something we're never going to be able to do. But that is what Shrey and his crew allegedly did. So there's the refund mechanism and the verification stuff, which, as you say, was somewhat addressed by the what happened after the Vice article. Just moving to Shrey specifically, uh, you know, I was going through his website, his social media, that sort of thing. Describes himself as a visionary, says he works in real estate, AI, entrepreneurship, very typical sort of hustle culture. I mean, just one line here from his website. AI is everywhere, but it's not just about knowing it exists, it's about leveraging it. Dive into how I've integrated AI into my daily grind and how you can do the same. The unlocking real estate section does not mention running a $7 million Airbnb scam. I did just go to check to read out the pseudo statement that he tweeted that I found. He didn't respond to Instagram message. I tried to book an appointment through his calendar app to talk to him, and he never turned up or never sent me the link, so I wasn't able to get comment that way. I went to just go check his tweet, but he's actually deleted it now. So fortunately, we have a copy in the article here. And I'm not going to read the whole thing because it goes on and on, but he does just say, yesterday was an incredibly tough day for me. While I can't publicly speak about the circumstances, I was heading to my condo feeling sorry for myself. Then he tells a very, very long story. That was on December 30th, I think. So he hasn't commented on the charges specifically, but he has cryptically posted seemingly about them. As for what happens now, I mean, he's not behind bars, it seems, right? He's out tweeting and all that sort of thing. And then just to be fair to Airbnb, to wrap it up, this is what they said in the statement. Airbnb is built on trust, and bad actors have no place in our community. We supported the US Attorney's Office and the FBI throughout their investigation to help ensure accountability, and we are thankful to them for their work. I mean, I guess now we just see what happens to his case, but I'm very interested if listeners have any other scams that are happening on Airbnb to write in with those. I've already had people email me saying, hey, how do I get in touch with Airbnb's customer service? I'm like, dude, what? I'm the wrong person to ask about that, but maybe you should try Airbnb yourself. All right, let's leave that there. And then after the break, we're going to talk about what's going on in North Carolina and Montana when it comes to porn access, maybe porn bans, and Pornhub specifically. It's a big mess. We'll be right back after this. And we're back. Sam wrote this one. North Carolina and Montana just lost access to Pornhub. Before we get into the nitty gritty of how we came to this, I mean, it's kind of in the headline, but Sam, what is the immediate impact here? Like, people can't access Pornhub from those states, or what's happening?
Yeah, so if you're trying to visit Pornhub or any of the sites that are owned by Pornhub's parent company, which used to be called MindGeek, but now it's called ALO, which is like a lot of sites. It's like RedTube, YouPorn, Brazzers. They own a bunch of stuff. If you try to go to any of those and you're in Montana or North Carolina and a handful of other states, which we can talk about in a minute, what you see is a page that's a video of performer Cherie DeVille talking about how your elected officials have passed a law that says age verification is required for porn sites and that Pornhub is opting out of servicing those sites altogether.
Yes. So so the reason that people in those states can't access Pornhub is, of course, related to the law, but it's not a direct consequence. As in, Pornhub is the one saying, you know what, we don't want to do this. We're just not going to let you access from those states, because the state law is now saying, well, you need to like upload your driver's license or whatever mechanism it may be. Is that right?
Yeah. The what Pornhub has said is, I mean, they're saying that there's not a real solution being offered by these laws. The laws are very vague. They don't say what the sites should be implementing to verify age.
Age being over 21 or 18, or what is it exactly?
18. So minors. But actually, I mean, it's so vague that it's like you have to prevent minors from being on your site. And it's up to the sites how they want to do that.
Right.
But there's no support on how to actually make that happen and keep you from, getting sued by someone who decides that their kid saw porn too soon and wants to take it to court based on this law.
Yeah. Is X Hamster part of that Pornhub umbrella, or is that...
No, they're not. They're not part of Pornhub's like sibling sites, but X Hamster is its own thing, and they did implement a age verification system called Yoti, which Pornhub has set up in. I think they have, or maybe it's just X Hamster. I think in Louisiana, we tested that at Motherboard, I believe, where we were trying to upload our ID. I was trying to get my ID to work through Yoti, which is actually a really hard, complicated process.
Could you just explain that process briefly? Like, so you went to the website and it asks for your ID. What are the steps? What happens?
I think Sam wrote that article, but I did the process. Like
I see.
I did that while she wrote the article.
I've done it too, but yeah.
Oh, you did it too. Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
because I just remember
it
took me like 50 steps. It was like,
so
oh my
long.
God, I cannot believe this is like how you have to access porn if you live in these states.
It scans your face. Like, it's biometrics. It's not just like, here's your ID. It's like it's comparing your face to your ID to a database of other information about you.
Gotcha. Were either of you successful with that? As in, did you get access to the porn? As in,
eventually.
Well, why was it difficult? Like it wouldn't recognize your face, or what? Why was it difficult?
For me, it was like it just kept failing. It was like you failed the face check, face card declined. But yeah, it was just over and over being like, you can't go forward because we can't, something about your camera, your lighting, or like the angle, or you look different than you did in your ID. I don't know. It just kept saying fail. Jason, did you ever get through?
Yeah, I got through. I think I tried both you can do it on the computer with a webcam, and you can do it through an app. And I tried on both, and it was arduous on both. It was like, first you have to download the app, then you have to accept the terms of service, then you have to, like, log in, then you have to take a photo of your ID, then you have to turn on the camera and scan your face and like have the lighting correct, as Sam was saying, and compare that to the photo that you took of your ID. Then you have to agree to like additional terms of service, blah blah blah. And it's like they do say throughout that they are going to delete this info once you've been verified. Like, the way that they're trying to do it is in such a way as to not provide your identity into a constant database. They're trying to like detect that you are over 18 and then give you a token, I believe,
Right.
that gives you access, but then they claim that they delete this stuff.
Still a very legitimate privacy and security concern.
It is, and it's Yoti is also used by like a lot of like welfare agencies, like state agencies that are trying to verify identity for like COVID checks and stuff like that. COVID checks being like COVID relief funds, things like that, and like unemployment, things like that. And it's not the only company that does it, but we did some articles at Motherboard about the types of identity verification companies that exist out there, and all of them had like pretty serious privacy concerns. A lot of them were just making tons and tons of money from state agencies, like getting weird contracts and so on and so forth. And so, I mean, Sam already said it, but my opinion is like Pornhub is basically like, we don't want to deal with this. We don't agree with it ethically. Like, we don't agree with sort of what is happening in these states. And so we're just going to shut down in those states.
Yeah,
Right.
they're just going dark out of like protests, basically.
Sure.
Which is, different for Pornhub to be publicly protesting the law. It's a big deal.
How do you mean? Because they're a company of such size, or what do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean they have waded into politics in the past, somewhat. They've lobbied in the past, but to be so publicly protesting something is new for them. They are usually like the happy end of year roundup. Pornhub, like they want the PR to be good and posy. And I think at this point they're kind of like, well, we're backed into a corner with some of this stuff. We can't keep like ceding ground to these laws that we know are not right and are going to affect the entire industry. So we're going to just plant our stake and say, too bad, no more. Figure out something else. Get around it with a VPN. They don't say that, but like that's what people are doing. But yeah, that's kind of different. It's a different tack for them to just block someone from the site altogether, which it does have an impact on traffic. Like people just go to X videos, like which is part of their point. They're like, people are going to go to less regulated, less moderated sites instead of the one that has really strong moderation right now.
You mentioned VPNs, so I think you went through some like Google Trends data. I think like what was the data around VPNs showing you?
Yeah, I mean, I just did it's a little bit like, it's pretty basic, but it's just if you go on Google Trends and search VPN, it shows you, like it does this in general for any search terms, but it shows you the states, like it lights up the states where it's popular. And just without fail, every time one of these sites goes down or one of these laws gets enacted and sites start requiring age verification, VPN gets popular in those sites or in those states. So it's like such a funny direct line to, you've banned porn effectively in this state without having to jump through all these hoops. And people are getting around it immediately by downloading VPNs, which you can spoof your location and, make it look like you're coming from somewhere else, which is how I see, that these states are, that the sites are down in these states. So they just go to VPN and do it the other way around. Go to Montana through my IP.
Talking about these states, just briefly on the law, with North Carolina, didn't they like sneak this in by attaching it to an unrelated law? I'm using the word sneak. That's not in your article. That's my pejorative. But like, that's what it reads like to me, right? What happened there?
got in through a much longer, more boring bill about adding a computer science requirement to high school graduation. It's just so bizarre that it went in that way. I assume that's the only way that they figured they could get it through. It was sneaky. I would say it was sneaky. Just kind of passing it in as part of this other law about graduating with a computer science credit.
Yeah,
And then
a
in there,
really
it's like,
weird place to attach it.
yeah. And then you're talking about pornography and access to it for minors. And it's like, what? Like, this is not even, not related at all.
Very strange. And then this follows similar stuff in Louisiana, but because of course it's not just North Carolina and Montana, they're just the ones the news today, right? I'm a little bit unclear on, was Louisiana the first, or were there more before this? Like briefly, so what's
Yeah.
the state by state timeline there?
Louisiana was the first. And that was last year. That was
Right.
this time last year. Since then, it's been done in Virginia, Arkansas, Mississippi, Utah was a really big one, Texas, and now North Carolina and Montana. And Texas actually is a little different than the others because theirs requires porn sites to show this big, like it was required to be 14-point font. This big warning that says the Texas Health and Human Services is warning you that porn causes like brain damage or something, like affects brain function,
Right.
which is not actually true or scientific.
There's no scientific basis for it.
Yeah. So, but the porn sites are required to put it on there. It's almost like a Surgeon General's warning if it was totally like made up.
It's crazy.
But yeah, those are it's eight states now that have these laws in place for age verification for porn.
Wild. Jason, I think you want to make a point about how this applies to social media, maybe?
Yeah. So age verification on the internet is a thing that was tried like back in the 90s and it didn't really work on porn sites. And then there's, many, many, many different federal bills that have attempted to implement age verification for social media and things like this. And over the last like year and a half, these efforts have really stepped up. And I think that the industry has found a place where it can win, which is these porn age verification laws. They're being pushed by sort of like conservative moral panic type groups, but they're also being pushed by these age verification technology companies. Like there is a lobbying group specifically for like the age verification industry, which uses the facial recognition comparative technologies we were talking about earlier. There's like a concerted industry that's pushing this, and there are various bills that have thankfully all been killed so far that would implement really similar things for social media in general, like not just porn, but to get a Facebook account, like you would need a real ID, and that wouldn't be something that Facebook implements because Facebook has implemented like an ID system in the past or like a real name system in the past, but basically like a parental consent situation, a like federal law that requires social media companies to collect this type of information from its users. And that's really scary. And I think that there's a slippery slope situation where it's like, if we're seeing these types of laws catch on for porn all over the country, and it's not a far jump from there to be like, you need an ID to make a Facebook account. You need an ID to use TikTok. You're not allowed to use TikTok in specific states. Like I think Wyoming banned TikTok, possibly. Don't quote me on that.
But do you think that slippery slope is like, of course it's a hypothetical, but do you think it's one that may actually have some weight behind it? Like that could actually happen, and it maybe even just one or two of these states or something.
Well, I think that it could happen, and it's happening in other countries as well. It's like the United Kingdom just passed a law that's pretty similar to what we're talking about for social media. Australia has considered something similar. And the difference is that we have the First Amendment here, and I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on this, but the excellent website Tech Dirt has been writing about this constantly over the last year. Like every new bill that's introduced, all of the sort of lobbying that's happening, and they are making inroads with politicians in terms of like getting more of these bills introduced. And of course, I do think that, yes, like we could see states starting to pass laws saying you need an ID to have a Facebook account, because we've seen time and time again that it's really easy to get certain states to do crazy shit if you have good lobbyists, or if you frame it through a "we must protect the children" lens. And I think Mike Masnick over at Tech Dirt has been making really strong arguments that these laws are unconstitutional, because they're sort of their government censorship of legal content.
I mean, it seems very clear. Yeah, I mean, it seems very clear to
Yeah.
violate.
It's also like it's in the text of the bill, like very clearly. It's a random number. It's like 33%, 33.3% or something of the content on your site if it's explicit, or if it can be categorized as harmful to minors, which you know,
that's so
covers
broad.
a lot of stuff.
Right. That could be a viral TikTok trend. Yeah, or Twitter, whatever.
That could be TikTok. That could be Twitter. That could be a lot of Facebook. Most of Reddit. Certainly, like if we just want to use Twitter as an example, definitely 33% of Twitter is porn at this point. It's like, so the result is either you're going to have an ID to get on Twitter, which Twitter's not going to do, or Twitter's going to kick off anything considered harmful, quote unquote, harmful to minors.
Well, I don't know. Maybe Twitter would. They already love the blue tick on Twitter.
Yeah, maybe.
Verification of all of the sites who would actually entertain it. I think Twitter is the one that might actually do it. It would still be absolutely insane.
Enough to do it, for sure.
Right. you phrase it a lot better than me. Don't get me wrong. I still think it's crazy.
Won't.
Yeah.
Reddit won't do that, so they'll kick off they've already been cracking down more on sex and explicit content, so that's where that'll go. So it's just like you can kind of just like Jason just laid out, you can see the path to where this goes if it keeps going this direction.
I mean, they're banning like innocuous books in lots of states, and so it's really easy for me to see like a similar sort of concerted lobbying effort from a Think of the Children type group being like, we need to ban TikTok. We need to, prevent any child from being on TikTok, regardless of what the federal law says. We want to make something that's more strict than, federal laws, which often say you have to be 13, or in some cases a little bit younger than that, or you need parental permission. And those like aren't super enforced. As someone who had a Facebook before I was 13, I think.
Whoa.
Or a MySpace, at least.
Crimes on air. All right. We will keep an eye on that story, of course, as it inevitably grows and develops and maybe spreads to other states. If you're listening to the free version of the podcast, I'll now play us out. But if you're a subscriber, we're going to talk about Wicker, I was going to say really popular. I actually don't know how popular it was. It was very popular among drug traffickers, encrypted app, which, as we reported today, is now dead. So if you want to hear our thoughts on that app, how Sam used it, how I used it, presumably how Jason used it as well, you can subscribe and gain access to that content at 404media.co. As a reminder, 404 Media is journalist founded and supported by subscribers. If you wish to subscribe to 404 Media and directly support our work, please go to 404media.co. You'll get unlimited access to our articles and an ad-free version of this podcast. You'll also get to listen to the subscribers only section where we talk about a bonus story each week. Another way to support us is by leaving a 5-star rating and review for the podcast. That stuff really helps us out. This has been 404 Media. We will see you again next week.